The plasma cutter screamed against Kepler station's hull as Dax Meridian watched his life's work burn through the viewport. 3 years. That's how long the Vorthik had held the Kepler 440 to system his system in their iron grip. The same system he'd spent decades designing, terraforming, and fortifying into humanity's crown jewel beyond the core worlds. Now he was breaking into his own creation. 30 seconds to breach, whispered Nia Voss, her voice crackling through the calm. The woman had been a mining engineer before the war. Now she was one of the last 12 humans left alive in this sector, and probably the only one crazy enough to follow him. On this suicide mission, Dax's fingers danced across his tablet, accessing schematics that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Every ventilation shaft, every power conduit, every hidden maintenance tunnel, all of it lived in his head. The Vorthik might have slaughtered the 90 million colonists who called this system home, but they'd made one critical error. They'd left the architect alive. Breach confirmed, Nia hissed, moving to phase 2. Dax slipped through the emergency airlock, his boots silent on the familiar deck plating. The corridors reeked of sulfur and ozone, the telltale signs of Vorthik. Occupation. Bioluminescent fungi now coated the walls where human children had once drawn pictures during school field trips. The invaders had transformed his gleaming station into a festering hive, but they didn't know about the ghost protocols. Every human settlement in the outer colonies had them hidden subroutines buried so deep in the infrastructure that they'd survive complete system overhauls. Dax had pioneered the technology after the Arcturus massacre, ensuring that no alien species could ever turn humanity's own creations against them. The Vorthik had spent 3 years mining the asteroid belts, strip mining the moons, and converting the orbital platforms into breeding facilities. They thought they owned Kepler 442. They had no idea they were living inside a loaded weapon. Contact, Nia's voice cut through his thoughts. To guards, Junction 7 Alpha. Dax checked his chronometer. Right on schedule, the Vorthik maintained predictable patrol patterns, a fatal flaw in their hive mind mentality. He'd been studying them from the shadows for months, memorizing their routines, learning their weaknesses. The guards rounded the corner in perfect synchronization, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming under the station's harsh lighting. 8 feet tall, 4 arms each, mandibles that could crush titanium. They'd earned their reputation as the galaxy's most feared warrior species, but they weren't human. Dax pressed himself against the wall as they passed, counting heartbeats. These creatures had butchered his colonists with methodical efficiency. They turned children into food and scientists into breeding stock. They committed genocide with the casual indifference of exterminators clearing vermin. Tonight, the vermin would bite back. Phase to complete, Nia reported. Charges placed on the secondary reactors. Copy. Moving to the primary control nexus. The central hub of Kepler Station rose before him like a cathedral of steel and light. Massive, holographic displays showed the entire system, his system crawling with Vorthik ships, hundreds of vessels, maybe thousands. They turned Kepler 442 into their primary staging ground for the next wave of expansion into human space. Dax smiled as he approached the master console. The Vorthik had tried to crack his encryption for 3 years. They brought in codebreakers from a dozen species, tortured human prisoners for information, even attempted to clone his neural patterns from recovered DNA samples. None of it mattered. The ghost protocols weren't in the computers. They were in the architecture itself. His fingers found the hidden panel beneath the primary display, exactly where he'd installed it 23 years ago. The biometric scanner hummed to life, reading the unique pattern of scars on his palm, scars he'd deliberately carved there during construction as the ultimate failsafe. Welcome back, Administrator Meridian, the system purred, initiating Ghost Protocol activation sequence. Around him, the station began to wake up. The first sign of trouble came from Sector 7, where Nia's explosives had done more than just damage the secondary reactors they'd awakened. Something the Vorthik didn't know existed. Emergency klaxons shrieked through the station as Dax's fingers flew across the control interface. Ghost Protocol Omega was coming online, and with it, every hidden weapons system he'd embedded in Kepler Station's superstructure. The Vorthik had been living inside a fortress designed to kill them, and they'd never realized it. Proximity alarms in the mining sector. Nia's voice crackled through the calm. They're mobilizing fast. Let them come, Dax muttered, watching. Tactical displays populate with red icons. The station's hidden sensor grid was revealing the true scope of the Vorthik infestation. Over 3,000 of the creatures swarmed through corridors that should have housed human families. Their breeding chambers pulsed in what used to be the botanical gardens, where his daughter had taken her first steps. The raids that followed threatened to overwhelm him. Movement on the security feeds caught his attention. A squad of Vorthic warriors was advancing on the central hub, their plasma rifles charging with ominous whines. These weren't the usual patrol guards, these were Apex-class soldiers, the elite killers that had spearheaded the initial invasion. Dax, you've got company incoming. Big company, Naya warned. He was already moving. The Ghost protocols had awakened the station's defensive systems, but manual activation would take precious minutes. Minutes he didn't have. The first Vorthic smashed through the blast doors like they were paper, mandibles clicking in excitement as they spotted their prey. The lead warrior raised its weapon, probably thinking this would be another easy execution. It had no idea who it was hunting. Dax stood behind a control console as plasma bolts seared the air above his head. The energy weapons left molten scars in the bulkheads, but they also triggered proximity sensors he'd hidden throughout the hub 20 years ago. Activating local defenses, he whispered to the station's AI. The floor beneath the lead warrior exploded upward as a hidden pulse cannon emerged from its concealed housing. The Vorthic had enough time to look surprised before the energy blast vaporized its torso, sending chunks of exoskeleton splattering across the chamber. The remaining warriors scattered, seeking cover, but they were fighting on Dax's home ground. Now, he designed every angle, every sight line, every possible field of fire. The hidden weapons systems tracked them with mechanical precision, pulse cannons and laser rays emerging from walls, and ceiling mounts like deadly flowers blooming. One warrior tried to flank left around a support pillar. A concealed flechette launcher turned it into organic confetti. Another attempted to reach the upper walkway. Gravity mines yanked it into the spinning blades of a camouflaged atmospheric processor. But the Vorthic were learning fast. Their Apex-class training kicked in as they began moving in coordinated patterns, using their fallen comrades as cover while advancing toward Dax's position. One of them actually managed to get close enough to swipe at him with its secondary arms. Razor-sharp claws missing his throat by inches, Dax rolled backward, his hand finding the emergency release for the maintenance shaft. He crawled through these tunnels as a young engineer, making sure every system was perfect. Now they were his lifeline. He dropped into the narrow passage just as plasma fire scorched the spot where he'd been standing. Above him, the surviving Vorthic warriors were tearing the control station apart, searching for him with methodical fury. Phase 3 initiated, he whispered into his comm. Ghost protocols at 40% activation. Copy that. I'm seeing automated defenses coming online across the station. Whatever you did, it's working. Through the maintenance shaft's transparent aluminum viewing ports, Dax could see the Vorthic warriors regrouping. 3 of them were left, and they were adapting to the station's defensive systems. With disturbing speed, one was already identifying concealed weapon mounts and marking them for destruction. Time for a more personal approach. Dax reached the auxiliary control node and began rerouting power from the main grid. The Vorthic thought they were hunting one desperate human. They had no idea they were fighting an entire space station that had been designed from the ground up to kill invaders. The atmospheric processors began cycling to combat mode, flooding certain sections with corrosive gases. Gravity generators shifted to create localized fields that would crush Vorthic exoskeletons while leaving human-proportioned spaces untouched. The artificial gravity itself became a weapon, creating deadly vortexes and strategic choke points. Through the station's internal comms, he could hear the alien warriors chittering grow more frantic as they realized they weren't fighting a man. They were fighting the station itself. Naya, report status, secondary explosion successful. 3 breeding chambers destroyed, estimated for 100 casualties. But Dax, they're sending everything they have toward your position. I count at least a full combat squadrons moving through the main corridors. He smiled grimly. Let them come. The Ghost protocols were at 60% now, and every minute gave him access to more of the station's hidden arsenal. The Vorthic had made this personal when they murdered his people. Now he was going to return the favor. The Vorthic response was swift and overwhelming. Through the station's sensor grid, Dax watched as they deployed their heaviest infantry units, towering Juggernaut-class warriors, whose exoskeletons could deflect anti-vehicle weapons. Behind them came swarms of smaller hunter-killers, scuttling through air vents and maintenance shafts like metallic spiders. They're adapting faster than projected, he muttered, watching tactical displays update in real time. The alien hive mind was analyzing the station's defensive patterns, learning to counter systems he'd spent decades perfecting. But they still didn't understand what they were really fighting. Ghost protocols at 75%, the station's AI announced. Warning, massive enemy troop movement detected in sectors 12 through 18. Estimated force strength, 8,000 combatants, 8,000. Nearly the entire Vorthik garrison was converging on his position. They weren't just trying to capture him anymore, they were trying to prevent whatever he was doing from reaching completion. Too late for that. Dax's fingers danced across the interface, activating systems the invaders had never suspected existed. The mighty lasers in the asteroid processing center swiveled toward the station's docking bays, their industrial-grade beams capable of cutting through capital ship armor. Automated defense turrets emerged from camouflage positions throughout the outer hull, their targeting computers loaded with 3 years' worth of enemy movement data. Naya, clear the maintenance levels. I'm about to make things very unpleasant for our guests. Already moving. How long until full activation? 12 minutes. Maybe less if they keep pushing this hard. The first wave hit the central hub like a tide of death. Juggernaut warriors smashed through reinforced barriers, while hunter-killers poured through every opening, their shrieking battle cries echoing through corridors that had once hosted diplomatic receptions. Dax sealed himself in the primary control chamber and watched them come. The hidden weapons systems opened fire simultaneously. Pulse cannons vaporized the first rank of attackers, while flechette launchers filled the air with razor-sharp projectiles. Gravity mines created crushing fields that turned Vorthik exoskeletons into powder, and atmospheric processors began venting superheated gases into strategic choke points. But there were too many of them. A Juggernaut warrior absorbed a direct hit from a pulse cannon and kept charging, its massive claws tearing through armored bulkheads like tissue paper. Hunter-killers swarmed over defensive positions, using their numbers to overwhelm automated targeting systems. For every alien that fell, 2 more took its place. They're breaking through the secondary perimeter, Naya reported, her voice tight with strain. Dax, whatever you're planning, you need to do it now. He was trying. The Ghost protocols were designed to activate gradually, bringing systems online in carefully programmed sequences to avoid overloading the station's power grid. But gradual wasn't going to be enough, not against this overwhelming assault. Computer, override safety protocols. Authorization Meridian Alpha 7. Warning, rapid activation may cause cascade failures in primary systems. Do it anyway. The station shuddered as massive power surges flowed through conduits that hadn't been active since construction. Emergency lighting flickered and died in some sections, while brilliant flares erupted from others. Throughout Kepler Station, systems that had slumbered for decades roared to life with mechanical fury. The mighty lasers fired first, their brilliant beams carving through the docking bays, where Vorthik transport ships were disgorging reinforcements. Entire vessels vanished in flashes of superheated plasma, their hulls vaporized before their crews could even scream. The few ships that survived found themselves trapped as massive blast doors sealed the bays, turning sanctuaries into death traps. In the asteroid processing centers, the industrial crushers began operating in reverse, launching chunks of ore at hypersonic velocities toward Vorthik positions. The projectiles struck with the force of artillery shells, pulverizing everything in their path. But the most devastating surprise was the station's structural systems themselves. Dax had designed Kepler Station as a modular construct with entire sections capable of reconfiguration for different purposes. Now those same systems became weapons as carters suddenly sealed themselves off, trapping groups of warriors in chambers that began filling with corrosive chemicals or crushing them with hydraulic presses disguised as maintenance equipment. My God, Naya whispered over the comm. You turned the entire station into a weapon. Not just a weapon, Dax replied, watching the carnage unfold across dozens of tactical displays. A graveyard. The Vorthik were dying by the hundreds, but they kept coming. Their hive mind mentality made them fearless, driving them forward even as their comrades fell around them. A group of hunter-killers managed to breach the control chamber's outer defenses, their plasma cutters slicing through armor plating that should have been impenetrable. Dax drew his sidearm, an ancient projectile weapon that most humans had abandoned in favor of energy weapons decades ago. The Vorthik exoskeletons were designed to deflect plasma and laser fire, but they'd never adapted to defend against simple metal bullets. The first hunter-killer through the breach took 3 rounds center mass, its internal organs liquefying as the bullets fragmented inside its body cavity. The second managed to close within striking distance before Dax put 2 shots through its primary brain cluster. The third got close enough to rake claws across his shoulder, tearing through his environmental suit and drawing blood before he killed it with a point-blank shot to its secondary head. Pain flared through his arm, but he ignored it. The Ghost protocols were at 90% activation now, and the station was becoming something unprecedented in human engineering, a living weapon that thought, adapted, and killed with calculated malice. Ghost Protocol Omega approaching. Full activation, the AI announced. All systems online, initiating final phase. Through the viewports, Dax can see the Vorthic fleet beginning to maneuver, their ships pulling back from the station as they finally realized the scope of the threat they were facing. But it was too late for retreat. The trap was already closing. The Vorthic fleet commander must have realized what was happening, because the alien ships began emergency acceleration away from Kepler Station. Just as Ghost Protocol Omega reached full activation, they were delayed by exactly 23 years. Dax had never intended the station to be just a civilian installation. In the aftermath of humanity's first contact with hostile alien species, every outer colony had been designed with a dual purpose. On the surface, they were research facilities, mining operations, or agricultural centers. Underneath, they were weapons of unimaginable destructive potential. Computer, activate the Meridian Field. Meridian Field activation requires final authorization. Warning, activation will render this station uninhabitable for human life. Dax looked at the tactical display showing 8 Vorthic capital ships, desperately trying to reach minimum safe distance. These were the same vessels that had glassed the colonial settlements, that had turned his daughter's school into a crater of fused silicon and ash. Authorization confirmed. Activate the Meridian Field. The effect was immediate and devastating. Every piece of metallic debris within a 50,000-kilometer radius suddenly became a kinetic projectile, accelerated to significant fractions of light speed by the station's hidden gravitational manipulators. The Vorthic ships found themselves in the center of a 3-dimensional minefield, where even microscopic particles struck with the force of nuclear weapons. The first capital ship, a massive Dreadnought-class vessel, simply came apart as thousands of hypervelocity impacts tore through its hull. The second managed to raise its shields before the debris storm hit, but the gravitational field was pulling more material into the kill zone. With each passing second, asteroid fragments destroyed, ship components, even ice crystals from the system's outer comets became weapons of mass destruction. Naya, get to the emergency pods now. This whole station is about to become uninhabitable. What about you? Someone has to maintain the field generators. Go. Through the station's sensor grid, he watched the Vorthic ground forces realize their fleet was being systematically destroyed. The disciplined advance turned into chaos as individual units broke ranks, some trying to reach escape pods while others continued their assault on the control center. With desperate fury, a pack of hunter-killers burst through the chamber's final defensive barrier, their mandibles chattering with rage as they spotted him at the control station. These weren't just soldiers, they were the hive mind's antibodies, designed to eliminate threats to the collective consciousness. Dax didn't even turn around. The station's internal defenses had been waiting for exactly this moment. Razor-sharp monofilament cables dropped from hidden ceiling compartments, slicing through exoskeletons like they were made of paper. The hunter-killers had enough time to scream before they were reduced to component molecules, their remains vaporized by plasma jets that erupted from the floor plating. But the victory was temporary. Through the hull-mounted cameras, he could see more Vorthic forces converging on his position, not just warriors now, but technical specialists carrying what looked like heavy demolition charges. They were going to try to destroy the control center, even if it meant sacrificing themselves in the process. Meridian Field at maximum intensity. The AI reported, orbital debris field achieving critical density. Warning, structural integrity at 37% and falling. The station was tearing itself apart. The gravitational manipulators were pulling in so much material that Kepler Station itself was being crushed by the debris field it had created. But the Vorthic fleet was dying faster than the station was failing. Through the tactical displays, Dax watched the third enemy capital ship succumb to the kinetic bombardment. Its hull breached in 17 locations simultaneously. The fourth ship managed to get its engines online, but the gravitational field caught it as it tried to escape, dragging it back into the kill zone, where hypervelocity impacts reduced it to expanding clouds of superheated plasma. "For down, for to go," he muttered, ignoring the blood running down his arm from the hunter-killer's claws. The Vorthic demolition team reached the control center's outer perimeter and began placing their charges. These weren't standard plasma explosives, they were quantum disruptors designed to unmake matter at the subatomic level. If they detonated those devices, they'd create a chain reaction that would destroy not just the station, but everything within a light-second radius, including the human colonies and the inner system. Dax's fingers flew across the controls, rerouting power from non-essential systems to the defensive networks. The station groaned around him as structural supports failed, and atmosphere began venting through hull breaches. But the hidden weapons systems were still responding to his commands. A concentrated barrage of pulse cannon fire swept through the demolition team, but more Vorthic were already taking their place. These aliens had evolved warfare into an art form, and they were willing to sacrifice thousands of individuals to eliminate a single threat to their collective survival. "Hull breach in Section 7, the AI announced with mechanical calm. Life support failure imminent. Recommend immediate evacuation. Negative. Maintain meridian field at maximum intensity." Through the viewports, he could see the fifth Vorthic capital ship breaking apart as the debris storm overwhelmed its shields. Chunks of its hull were already being caught by the gravitational field, adding their mass to the expanding cloud of hypervelocity projectiles that was systematically destroying the alien fleet. But the station wouldn't hold together long enough to finish the job. The gravitational manipulators were designed for long-term operation, not the massive power loads required to maintain the meridian field at this intensity. Critical systems were failing throughout the station, and the Vorthic were still fighting with desperate determination to reach the control center. "Naya, are you clear?" Her voice crackled through failing communication systems. "Pod launched." "Dax, the station's coming apart. You need to get out of there." "Not yet. 3 ships still operational." He was lying. The 6th Vorthic capital ship was already showing signs of critical damage, its engines flickering as debris impacts damaged its power systems. The 7th ship was trying to use the wreckage of its destroyed companions as cover, but the meridian field was pulling that debris into the kill zone as well. Only 1 ship remained fully operational, the flagship, a massive command vessel that had been hanging back at the edge of the engagement zone. It was accelerating now, not toward the station, but away from it, trying to escape the system entirely. Dax couldn't let that happen. If even 1 Vorthic ship escaped to report what had happened here, they'd adapt their tactics. They learned to counter the ghost protocols, to recognize the signs of hidden human weapons systems. The next human colony wouldn't stand a chance. "Computer, overload the gravitational manipulators. Full power to the meridian field generators. Warning, overload will result in catastrophic system failure. Estimated time to station destruction for minutes, 37 seconds. Do it." The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The meridian field expanded outward like a wave of invisible death, its gravitational influence reaching across the entire inner system. The fleeing Vorthic flagship found itself caught in an inescapable tide of accelerated debris, its hull punctured by thousands of hypervelocity impacts in the span of seconds. As it died, its destruction added to the field's lethality, creating a cascading effect that would render the Kepler 440 the system uninhabitable for centuries to come. But the Vorthic fleet was gone. Every ship, every transport, every escape pod had been reduced to component atoms by the storm of hypervelocity debris. The system was human again. The death of their fleet sent the Vorthic ground forces into a berserker frenzy. Through the station's failing sensor grid, Dax watched as every surviving alien warrior abandoned their positions and converged on the control center in a final, desperate assault. They knew they were going to die. Their fleet was gone. The station was coming apart, and there were no escape routes left. But they were going to take the architect with them. "Massive troop concentration detected," the AI reported, its voice distorting as power fluctuations cascaded through damaged systems. "Estimated enemy strength, 2,700 combatants. All classes represented, 2,700. Nearly every Vorthic on the station was coming for him now. Juggernauts, hunter-killers, apex warriors, even the technical specialists and breeding cast members who normally never participated in direct combat. This wasn't a military assault anymore. It was a death charge. Dax sealed the control center's blast doors and activated every remaining defensive system. The hidden weapons emplacements emerged from their concealed positions throughout the hub, their targeting computers struggling to lock onto the massive wave of enemies. Flowing through the corridors like an alien tsunami, the first line of defense was the atmospheric processors, which began venting concentrated acids and neurotoxins into the air circulation system. Dozens of Vorthik collapsed as their exoskeletons dissolved or their nervous systems shut down. But the survivors pressed forward, some of them carrying crude breathing apparatus scavenged from human equipment. The second line was the gravity, mine's localized distortion fields that could crush a juggernaut warrior into a sphere of compressed matter the size of a marble. They activated in sequence as the aliens approached, creating invisible walls of death that reduced the charging horde to scattered atoms. But there were too many targets, and the mine network was never designed to handle this volume of simultaneous activations. Explosions rippled through the gravity generators as they overloaded, sending shockwaves through the station's superstructure. Sections of the hull began peeling away as artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, creating zones where Vorthik warriors were crushed against bulkheads or flung into space. Through suddenly opened hull breaches, third defensive perimeter breached. The AI announced, "Enemy forces have reached the primary hub." Dax watched through the security feeds as a pack of juggernaut warriors smashed through the hub's reinforced barriers, their massive forms shrugging off pulse cannon fire that should have vaporized them. Behind them came waves of smaller aliens, using the giants as mobile cover while they advanced through the devastated chamber. The pulse cannons fired continuously now, their barrels glowing white-hot as they poured energy into the attacking horde. Vorthik warriors fell by the dozens, their exoskeletons cracking under repeated impacts. But more kept coming to take their place. The chamber floor became a carpet of alien corpses, but still they advanced. A hunter-killer pack managed to reach the control center's outer defenses, their plasma cutters slicing through armor plating that was already weakened by previous battles. Dax activated the emergency system's hidden compartments opened throughout the chamber, releasing swarms of maintenance drones that had been converted into flying bombs. The drones detonated in brilliant flashes of light and sound, their explosions tearing through the packed ranks of Vorthik warriors. Limbs and chunks of exoskeleton splattered against the walls as the improvised weapons found their targets, but the aliens kept coming. They climbed over the bodies of their fallen comrades, using corpses as shields while they continued their relentless advance. Our blast doors failing, the AI reported. Structural integrity at 18%. The first juggernaut warrior broke through the control center's final barrier, its forearms ending in claws that could tear through starship hull plating. It spotted Dax at the control station and charged with a roar that shook the entire chamber. Dax didn't move. He could not without releasing the controls that maintained the meridian field. Instead, he triggered the center's final defensive system, a series of shaped charges hidden in the walls and ceiling, designed to turn the entire chamber into a kill box. The explosions came in sequence, each one calculated to create overlapping fields of shrapnel and concussive force. The charging juggernaut disappeared in a cloud of metal fragments, its massive form reduced to scattered organic matter in milliseconds. But the explosion also damaged the control station's shielding, exposing Dax to the devastating barrage. Hot metal tore through his left leg, and a piece of destroyed bulkhead cracked two of his ribs. Blood ran down his face from a scalp wound, but his hands never left the controls. The meridian field was still active, still pulling debris into the kill zone around the station's remains. More aliens poured through the breached barrier, smaller hunter-killers that were fast enough to dodge the remaining defensive systems. They swarmed toward him like mechanical insects, their mandibles chattering with anticipation. Computer, activate emergency protocol 77 Alpha. Warning, protocol 77 Alpha will result in total atmospheric loss within 60 seconds. Do it. Every atmosphere vent in the station opened simultaneously, creating a hurricane of escaping air that sucked the smaller Vorthik warriors toward hull breaches and emergency openings. Dozens of them were pulled into space, their struggles visible through the viewports as they tumbled into the expanding debris field. But the larger warriors maintained their grip on fixed structures, weathering the atmospheric storm until the station's air was gone. Then they resumed their advance through the vacuum, their exoskeletons providing them with limited life support capabilities. Dax activated his suit's emergency oxygen supply and kept working, The control station's displays were failing one by one as power conduits overloaded and backup systems went offline. But the meridian field generators were still responding to his commands. Through the few remaining sensors, he could see that the debris field had expanded to encompass nearly the entire inner system. A hunter-killer reached the control station and leaped at him. Its claws extended. Dax caught it in midair with his sidearm, putting 3 rounds through its brain cluster before its momentum carried its corpse into the control panels behind him. Sparks flew as critical systems went offline, but the field generators held steady. Another alien appeared at the chambers, entranced, not a warrior this time, but one of the technical specialists, carrying what looked like a quantum disruptor. Charge. If it detonated that device in the control center, it would unmake everything within a 50-kilometer radius, including the meridian field generators. Dax had 1 shot left in his weapon. The specialist was moving with careful precision, trying to position the disruptor for maximum effect. If he missed, or if the device had a dead man switch, the explosion would destroy everything he'd worked to accomplish. He took careful aim and squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck the quantum disruptor dead center, causing it to detonate prematurely. The specialist vanished in a flash of exotic energy that unmade matter at the subatomic level, taking a section of the chamber wall with it. But the explosion was contained, and the field generators continued their lethal work. Through the viewport, Dax could see the last of the Vorthic fleet burning in the distance, their hulls torn apart by the endless stream of hypervelocity projectiles. The debris field was self-sustaining now, its gravitational influence pulling in material from across the system. To feed its destructive hunger, the battle was over, the system was cleansed. But Kepler's station was dying around him, and there was no way out. The station shuddered like a dying animal as its superstructure finally began to collapse. Through the failing displays, Dax could see massive sections of the outer hull peeling away and being drawn into the meridian field's gravitational influence. The weapon he created was consuming its own platform, turning Kepler's station into fuel for its endless hunger. Critical structural failure imminent, the AI announced, its voice barely audible through the static. Recommend immediate evacuation to emergency pods. Negative. Maintain field integrity at all costs. He wasn't leaving, not when he was this close to completing the work. The Vorthic fleet was destroyed, but their ground forces were still fighting with desperate fury throughout the station's remaining sections. If he abandoned the control center, now they might find a way to shut down the field generators before the system was completely cleansed. Through the chamber's cracked viewports, he could see the debris field expanding like a malevolent star, its gravitational tendrils reaching across space to gather more material for its destructive purpose. Chunks of destroyed starships orbited the station at impossible velocities, their metal hulls glowing white-hot from atmospheric friction. As they spiraled inward toward the field generators, a new wave of Vorthic warriors appeared at the chambers, entranced the last survivors of their ground forces, probably fewer than 100 aliens total. But these weren't ordinary soldiers. They were the Praetorian Guard, the hive mind's ultimate warriors, each one worth a dozen regular troops in combat effectiveness. Their exoskeletons were different from the other, sleeker, more heavily armored, with integrated weapons systems that glowed with exotic energy. These creatures had been held in reserve for emergencies, and now they were being deployed for the final assault on his position. Praetorian-class enemies detected, the AI reported with mechanical precision. Warning: current defensive systems insufficient to repel assault. Dax knew it was true. The chamber's weapons were mostly destroyed, the gravity mines were exhausted, and the atmospheric processors were offline. He had his sidearm, with maybe a dozen rounds left, at a control station that was held together with emergency power and desperate hope. But he also had something the Vorthic didn't understand. Human engineering wasn't just about building things that worked. It was about building things that kept working even when they shouldn't, that found ways to function beyond their design parameters when survival depended on it. Every human colony in the outer systems had been constructed with that philosophy: redundancy upon redundancy, backup systems for the backup systems, and hidden capabilities that activated only in the most desperate circumstances. Computer, access emergency protocol Omega Black. Protocol Omega Black requires voice authorization and biometric confirmation. Warning: activation will result in total system destruction. I know. Authorization: Dax Meridian, architect of Kepler. Station: defender of humanity, father of Elena Meridian. His voice broke slightly on his daughter's name. She'd been 7 when the Vorthik came, attending classes in the primary school on level 12. He'd found her body 3 years later, or what was left of it after the aliens had finished with her. Biometric confirmation required. Dax pressed his palm against the scanner, letting it read the unique pattern of scars he'd carved there so many years ago. The same scars that had activated the ghost protocols that had turned his peaceful space station into an instrument of vengeance. Confirmed. Protocol Omega Black authorized. Initiating controlled fusion cascade. The Praetorian warriors charged as the station's fusion reactors began their final, fatal dance. These aliens moved within human speed, their integrated weapons systems firing concentrated plasma bursts that melted through the control station's remaining armor. But speed wouldn't save them from what was coming. Fusion cascade in progress. The AI announced. Estimated time to detonation, 90 seconds. Dax emptied his weapon into the leading Praetorian, the bullet sparking off its advanced armor without penetrating. The creature reached him in 3 bounds, its primary claws, swiping toward his throat with surgical precision. He rolled backward, feeling the razor-sharp talons slice through the air where his head had been moments before. But the alien's attack had brought it close enough to the control station for Dax to trigger the manual overrides. His fingers found the emergency plasma release valve, and superheated gas erupted from the damaged conduits directly into the Praetorian's face. The creature's exoskeleton began to bubble and melt as temperatures exceeding those found in stellar cores washed over its body. The Praetorian fell backward, its death scream echoing through the chamber as its comrades pressed their attack. 2 more of the elite warriors reached the control station, their weapons carving through the remaining displays in showers of sparks and molten metal. 60 seconds to cascade detonation. The station was shaking itself apart now. Massive structural beams twisted and snapped as the fusion reactors built toward critical mass, their magnetic containment fields fluctuating wildly. Through the viewports, Dax could see sections of the outer hull spinning away into space, their metal superstructure glowing like fallen stars as they were consumed by the meridian field. A Praetorian warrior managed to grab him by the shoulder, its claws punching through his environmental suit and into the flesh beneath. Pain flared through his body as the alien lifted him off his feet, preparing to tear him apart with its secondary arms. Dax triggered the emergency coolant release. Liquid nitrogen erupted from hidden nozzles throughout the chamber, flash freezing everything within a 3-meter radius. The Praetorian's exoskeleton cracked like glass as its internal fluids crystallized, and Dax broke free from its grip as the creature shattered into fragments of frozen alien matter. 30 seconds to cascade detonation. The remaining Praetorians were retreating now, finally understanding what was about to happen. But it was too late, for escape. The station's emergency bulkheads had sealed automatically when the fusion cascade began, trapping everyone inside the expanding sphere of destruction. Dax hauled himself back to the control station, his wounded shoulder screaming in protest. The displays were nearly all dead now, but the field generators were still responding to manual commands. Through the static-filled communication system, he could hear Naya's voice calling his name. Her escape pod safely clear of the detonation zone. 15 seconds to cascade detonation. He thought about Elena, about the colonists who had trusted him to keep them safe, about the billions of humans in the core worlds who would never know what had happened in the Kepler 440 system. They would only know that the Vorthik expansion had stopped here, that some invisible barrier had turned their conquering fleet into scattered atoms. 10 seconds to cascade detonation. The fusion reactors reached critical mass simultaneously, their combined output exceeding the energy production of small stars. The explosion expanded outward at significant fractions of light speed, consuming the station's remains and adding their mass to the meridian field's destructive hunger. But in those final seconds, as the wavefront of nuclear fire washed over the control center, Dax smiled. The system was clean, the Vorthik were gone, and every human colony in the outer systems would know what had happened here, would know that their defenses worked, that their hidden weapons could turn the tide against any invader. The wave of fusion fire reached the control center, and Dax Meridian became light. 3 months after the Kepler event, as the military historians were already calling it, Captain Naya Voss stood before the United Colonies Defense Council. In the gleaming halls of New Geneva, the metal on her chest felt heavier than it should have. The Star of Terra, humanity's highest military decoration, awarded for exceptional valor in defense of human space. She wished Dax could have been there to receive his. The tactical implications are still being analyzed, she reported to the assembled officials, her voice steady despite the memories that threatened to overwhelm her. The Meridian field created a self-sustaining debris storm that will render the Kepler 440, the system uninhabitable for centuries. No Vorthic vessels escaped the engagement zone. General Morrison, head of Colonial Defense, leaned forward in his chair. What about their other fleets? Intelligence suggests they had significant forces positioned in the neighboring systems. Withdrawn, Naya replied. All of them. Long-range reconnaissance indicates a complete Vorthic retreat from human space. They're pulling back to their core territories and establishing defensive positions. The implications hung in the air like a charged particle field. For the first time since first contact, humanity had forced an alien species to retreat. The Vorthic, the same creatures who had conquered 17 different starfaring civilizations, were afraid of humans now. How is that possible? Asked Dr. Sarachan, the Council's xenobiology expert. The Vorthic hive mind doesn't experience fear the way we do. Their tactical decisions are based on calculated risk assessment, not emotion. Naya activated the holographic display, showing the final moments of the battle as recorded by her escape pod sensors. The Kepler system burned like a miniature galaxy, its planets and moons consumed by the expanding debris field, while the fusion cascade added its own nuclear fury to the destruction. They're not afraid of us, she said quietly. They're afraid of what we might have hidden in our other colonies. Administrator Meridian's ghost protocols were designed to be undetectable until activation. From the Vorthic perspective, every human settlement might be a potential weapon. The silence that followed was profound. Around the council chamber, humanity's leaders contemplated the new reality that Dax Meridian had created with his sacrifice. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted, and it had shifted in humanity's favor. We've received communications from 12 different alien species in the past month. General Morrison continued. Trade agreements, non-aggression pacts, offers of technological exchange. Some of them are civilizations that have been under Vorthic threat for centuries. They want to be on our side now, Naya observed, just in case we decide to go on the offensive. She thought about the man who had made it all possible, the quiet engineer, who had spent decades building defenses that looked like civilian infrastructure, who had turned a space station into a weapon of such devastating effectiveness that it had broken the will of the galaxy's most feared warrior species. But the cost had been terrible. 90 million human colonists dead, an entire star system rendered uninhabitable, and Dax himself, consumed by the fusion fire that had powered his final victory. There's something else, Naya said, calling up another set of displays. We've been monitoring the Vorthic retreat. Their fleet movements suggest they're not just withdrawing, they're building something. Massive construction projects in 3 different systems, all in heavily fortified positions. Defensive installations? Asked Dr. Chen. Unknown, but the energy signatures are significant. Whatever they're building, it's consuming the resources of entire worlds. General Morrison nodded grimly. We'll need to accelerate the Ghost Protocol installation program. If Administrator Meridian's sacrifice taught us anything, it's that we can't rely on conventional defenses alone. Over the following months, every human colony in the outer systems received visits from mysterious engineering teams. Officially, they were there to upgrade civilian infrastructure, improve power systems, better atmospheric processors, enhance communications networks. The colonists welcomed the improvements, never knowing that their peaceful settlements were being transformed into potential weapons of mass destruction. The Ghost protocols spread throughout human space like a hidden virus, embedding themselves in the architecture of civilization itself. Mining stations became kinetic bombardment platforms. Agricultural centers concealed time matter production facilities. Research stations hid weapons that could crack planets or boil away the atmospheres of entire worlds. But perhaps the most important change was psychological. The outer colonists, who had always seen themselves as vulnerable targets on the edge of civilized space, began to understand that they were actually humanity's first line of defense. Not victims waiting to be rescued, but guardians armed with weapons their enemies couldn't detect or understand. A year after the Kepler event, a small memorial was erected in the ruins of the system's asteroid belt. It consisted of a single, titanium plaque, radiation hardened to survive the harsh environment of the debris field, in memory of Dax Meridian and the 90 million colonists of Kepler 442, they died as humans. They are remembered as the guardians of our species' future. But the real memorial was the silence that had fallen across the galaxy's war zones. For centuries, the Vorthik had expanded their territory through systematic conquest, enslaving or exterminating every species they encountered. Their fleets had been the terror of civilized space, their hive mind tactics unstoppable. Now those same fleets cowered behind defensive barriers, afraid to venture into the void where human colonies waited with hidden fangs. The predators had become prey, and they knew it. In the depths of space, automated probes continued to monitor the Vorthik construction projects. Whatever the aliens were building, it was massive structures that dwarfed anything in human space, powered by energies that registered on sensors from light years away. But humanity was building too. In hidden facilities throughout the outer colonies, engineers worked on projects that would have been unimaginable before the Kepler event. Planet killers disguised as weather control systems, starbreakers hidden in stellar monitoring stations, weapons that could reach across interstellar space to strike at enemies who thought themselves safe behind their fortifications. The age of human expansion had begun, and it would be written in the language that Dax Meridian had taught the galaxy, the language of consequences. In the end, that was his true legacy, not the destruction of a single fleet or the liberation of one star system, but the fundamental shift in how the galaxy viewed humanity. No longer were humans seen as primitive newcomers to be conquered or assimilated. They were recognized as something far more dangerous, a species that could hide weapons in the very foundations of civilization, that could turn their own colonies into instruments of devastating retribution. The Vorthik had taken the Kepler system, but they had made a critical error. They had forgotten to kill the one man who designed it, and now, throughout human space, 1,000 other architects worked in secret, building defenses that would ensure such an error could never be made again. The galaxy had learned to fear the quiet humans who built things. It was a lesson they would never forget.